Okay, we're here for part 9 of our interview with Judy Wagoner. And today we are going to start talking about when my father Darwin got sick.
Okay, when we lived in Dunedin, Darwin started slowing down. We would always walk for 25 years. We walked every morning at 6:30, and it was a mile and a half or 2 miles we walked, and it was a lovely time, a private drive, and it was a really nice place to walk. But he started getting to the point where he couldn't go very fast, and then he got to the point where he couldn't go all the way around. We had to go a little ways and come back. And then we gradually just had to stop the walking because he wasn't able to keep up. And he wasn't really going to the doctor for any of that. I kept suggesting that he needed to. For years, even before we moved to the east coast of Florida, I wanted him to go to I'm trying to think of the name of that big hospital in Clearwater. Do you recall that? It's a big heart specialist hospital, and I wanted him to go down there and have tests made. Well, he wouldn't do it. He said there wasn't anything wrong, and I just told him at the time I thought he did have some problem. Well, and if his doctor ever suggested it, he never told me. And so he was slowing down to that extent. And then he had retired from his job, although he had been semi-retired almost the whole time we had lived over there. He was in the real estate industry, and he was a broker, and so he didn't have, he had money coming in that he didn't have to really get out and work for. But he still was slowing down quite a bit, and I noticed a lot of times he would write down what he wanted to say to somebody on the phone, and so that he wouldn't forget something to say. Well, I can understand that because I know how forgetful, how it is to start becoming a little older and getting forgetful. And I'm not the only one. There are people a lot younger than me that have that same problem. But so he was doing little things like that. Now he was functioning fine. He stopped being active in church. He had always, before, he had been on a session and on the deacons and a lot of committees and just did a lot of things at church. And that slowed way down then the last couple of years, and he would go to church every Sunday, but he would sit by himself, and he always sat near one of the exit doors, not the main door. And of course, a lot of people do that. I do it too lots of times when I'm leaving from my church, but because it's less crowded. But he wouldn't socialize at all and talk to people much. And he always did. He was very friendly. And so he would leave and go out and sit in the car. He would usually get a cookie or coffee or something like that and go out and sit in the car and wait on me, because it took a while since I was always in the choir. It took me a while to get everything together before I could leave. And so that was going on, and he went to the doctor, fairly regularly, which wasn't much. They didn't require him to come too often. And so anyway, when he would still take me, because I taught school fairly close to where we lived in a neighboring town, and there were he would always take me to work and pick me up. That way we didn't have to maintain 2 cars, and I didn't have to drive. And he liked to do that. He would take me to work every morning and come and pick me up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or later sometimes, because I'd work late. And so he would he was always still doing things like that and driving fine. And so we decided that I retired. And when I retired, we decided that we would have a big garage sale, big sale We had a 4-day garage sale, and we got rid of at least half of everything we had, and that was a big home that we lived in Dunedin. And so we got rid of a lot of that, and we knew we had been over here to Doris's prior to that in June, and Darwin had made arrangements to rent our house in Sheridan Lakes at that time, and so we knew about what we needed in order to live in that house. So we had pretty well gotten rid of a lot of other stuff. We donated an awful lot of stuff, and then we moved. And it was a busy summer. It was a busy time. He got along just fine, but he wasn't real active. Not a go-getter like he always had been. He still worked at his desk every day and was on the phone a lot and things like that. And so we moved to Sheridan Lakes in West Melbourne in September or October? October.
I don't remember.
In October of that year. And of course, he had been retired quite a while, and then I had been retired all summer. And so we got all settled, moved in, and had our furniture delivered. And
2 doors
everything
down
like
from
that.
us.
Pardon?
2 doors down from us.
Yes, we were thrilled to death over that. He was, especially because Dex they were tiny, both of them, and Darwin was always thrilled to death with Dex because he was big enough to play with. And
He's a
Darwin
boy.
and it was very sad because Darwin kept going downhill, basically in his movements. And you know, I can't remember the time frame real well right now. I guess I should have looked it up. But we got settled and we enjoyed it so much. We would sit on our lanai, and we had a lake behind us, and sit on our lanai and talk about how pleasant it was to be retired in such a lovely little home. It was new, brand new. Nobody had lived there before we did. And with a nice big lanai, and we had a kitty cat, and we were just real happy there. And it was so pleasant for both of us. It was a small house, and so we were quite comfortable there. And then we did go to his doctor there, and then we went to, somehow we ended up going to Dr. Packey. I don't know if you suggested him to Reese because Don knew about him, or whether his doctor may
I
have.
thought you didn't go to him till later.
Well,
I'm pretty sure you didn't go to him till Dad was pretty advanced.
it could be.
Yeah, he was going
guess
to
you're
Dr.
right.
Kimmel.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, Dr. Kimmel was where we were
Who
going.
works with Don.
And he, and Darwin was pretty bright with him. He, you know, he told him off a few times, and but he was still slowing down some, and his driving wasn't quite as good, especially at night. He had a problem with his night vision too. At that time, it was beginning to deteriorate, and so eventually, you know, we got along fine. You probably remember, you know, he got to the point where he was walking fine, but he finally went to using a cane. I remember I bought him a cane.
I think it was his left leg was,
One of them, yeah. And
difficult.
So he had some problems there, and so eventually we did take him to Dr. Packey, who was a neurologist, and he had seen him a couple times before the end, and but he was just deteriorating more as far as being able to get around, and then of course he had Guillain-Barré. That was right after we moved there, wasn't it?
he was having memory issues
Yeah.
and did not do anything about that. And then, but he was definitely having mobility issues, and then he had the one time where he was having trouble moving and he went to the hospital.
He couldn't walk.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we took him to the hospital, and of course they couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. And he was in the hospital for 27 days, and they couldn't figure out what to do, and so they sent him to Sea Pines.
Rehabilitation.
Yeah, and that was for another 20-some days. And he was able, they trained him to handle himself fine in a wheelchair. And so he really could not walk by that time. And they had finally, before he ended up in the hospital, we finally decided, I said, Darwin, you're gonna have to go somewhere to go to a specialist. Because I said, we went to this one neurologist here in Melbourne.
That was after
but
the
he didn't-
hospital.
No, it was before. And he couldn't tell us what was wrong. And so he went, and then finally we got to the point where he had to go to enter the hospital, so we went to Wusthof Hospital, and that's where he spent the 27 days. And he saw, I don't know how many, maybe close to 27 doctors, a lot of doctors at that time, different times he was having. He went in there originally for a terrible, terrible backache that occurred one day, and he kept telling me he really hurt. And so that night, he told me, he said, you've got to take me to the hospital. He said, I just hurt so bad, I just don't know what it is. So we took him in, and of course they kept him all that time then, trying to figure out what was wrong with him. Well, they never really ever did. So finally we went to Shands Hospital in,
After he got out of Sea Pines.
I guess that's right, yeah, all the time he was in Sea Pines, and he kept continuing to see doctors there. None of them, and the problem was, Guillain-Barré usually always starts with the fact that you cannot breathe, and they have to put you on a respirator. Well, he didn't have that problem. He just could not do anything.
He couldn't walk. He couldn't use his lower body to walk.
He couldn't walk, and his arms were hurt somewhat. He wasn't able to write like he used to, and things like that also. Everything else was fine, and he wasn't hurting. And so they didn't know what was wrong with him. And so we went to Shands Hospital and had an appointment at 7 o'clock in the evening, because this was a teaching hospital in Gainesville. And the doctor that we saw was a professor there too. And he had to work Darwin in his schedule. And we probably weren't there 45 minutes until he told us what was wrong with him. He ran a nerve conduction test, which Darwin had a nerve conduction test in Clearwater, in Melbourne, with that neurologist there. However, it was an old machine, and so they didn't tell him much. Well, this nerve conduction test pinpointed it right on the bat, and so he told us what was wrong. And he said, now usually people get over this by a year's time. You'll be walking fine. And well, it was wonderful news. And so we felt so much better, and we were glad we had gone there. But it took a good year for him to really get around on his own. Now, he did improve, but it was very slowly, and he never totally got over it. And he improved. He was in a wheelchair all that time, and then toward the end he was walking with the cane, and he was doing fine. And so that, was real good. So that got over with. And then he started having the little problems with his memory and things like that.
And he
so
started swelling up with congestive heart failure,
well, that's true. I've forgotten about that.
which he didn't know what that was for several years.
Well, and that's another thing that was never diagnosed. I don't know why. And I always wrote down everything they told us. And I still do. Every time I go to the doctor, I write it all down. In fact, I used to have doctors that would complain about that. And I thought, well, I need to remember this, And of course, Darwin wouldn't. Half the time, he didn't even pay attention to what they were saying to him. But, they never ever told us anything concrete about any of it. And so.
Part of that is for Barton
And
County.
in fact, when I wanted him released from, well, he got real severe when he was at Sea Pines, after all of that. And, I guess that was the second time he went in. He was at Sea Pines with Guillain-Barré, and then, months later, he started having, some problems, and so we went to, we're still with, what's his name?
Dr. Kimmel?
No, Murray, what's his last name? That works with Don.
Kimmel.
Kimmel, yeah. We were still going to him, and he recommended we might wanna go to a neurologist again. So we did, we were trying to find somebody, but, Darwin kept, having problems, being able to, he could always sleep, but he was restless. And by the way, when he had Guillain-Barré, that's such a severe pain that he was on morphine for a while too. And that really affected him. He slept well, and he got over all of that. But that was a strange situation for him and for me too. And so anyway, but he wasn't having any severe pain anymore. He was fine from that. And so that kind of progressed into a little more of a dementia type situation for Darwin. And I'm sure another problem that Darwin experienced, about the time we moved from Dunedin to West Melbourne, he had a difficult time with an investor. The investor took off with a tremendous amount of money, stolen. And that hurt. Darwin lost a lot of money, and a lot of the people, Darwin was an excellent salesman. And he had a lot of people invested in that. And they all lost a lot of money. And, I remember through the years that was going on, I kept telling him, what's gonna happen when they don't like what, they don't get the money they want, what, and he would never answer me. He said it was their choice, I didn't push them into doing that. I just gave them the opportunity, and they took it or they denied it. Had both ways. Well, so he never felt that it was his fault, of course, and it wasn't. He lost more than most of them. And the thing is that really affected him. And he, of course, the FBI was involved with that guy, and they talked to Darwin, and so Darwin helped him. Darwin gave him a lot of the information with things that guy had done, because Darwin had worked for him. Darwin didn't work for a salary. He was not hired by that so-called company to do that. He just was a salesman. He suggested it to people, and they wanted to, they did it. He had nothing to do with it. They did it all on their own. All he did is tell them that it was a pretty good deal, and it was. It would have been. Well, that really hurt Darwin. He was very, very upset over that. And he was very, very stressed. And I think all of that stress that he went through, it was Doris, you didn't know that, but it was a tremendous amount of stress that he suffered over that whole and it wasn't his fault. He didn't do anything wrong, and he was able to prove that. But
it was a tricky kind of business to be in.
Well, I've always told him that. My dad told him that. Don't get in the investment business, but everybody we know that's in the investment business has come out on the bad end. But anyway, he wouldn't listen. He was gonna make a lot of money. And so anyway, and he would have if the guy hadn't been a thief. So the FBI investigated the guy, and Darwin gave him all kinds of information. Darwin even, we traveled down to Miami, and Darwin had a video conference with an agent in California, and answered all the questions, told them all about the situation, what it was like, who was involved, and And they appreciated that. And we gave them a ton of written information that we had on it, receipts from everything, bank statements and everything, so they knew Darwin was honest with it. And, but, you know, we were hoping that they could get the money back, but they, you know, that's a hope. You never get that. Even if the FBI does it, they can't, the guy, as soon as we got it, that money was probably out of this country, you know, as soon as he got it, you know.
Did the guy go to prison?
Oh, yeah, he was in
Yeah.
prison. I don't know how long, or maybe he's still there. He should be. But he had a couple of sons that we met. We went to some of their meetings and things, you know how these businesses are. And one of his sons told Darwin once, he said, even though he's in prison, he's probably still planning the next way of making money. So anyway, and then he's talking about his dad. But anyway, that was quite an experience. I stayed out of it. I was against it from day one, but he wouldn't listen to me. And because and of course, what do you think? Well, I'd hate for him to stop, and then it would work. You know, I mean, what do you do when you're on the sidelines like that? But anyway, the stress was tremendous, and that led to I think the congestive heart failure got worse, and the heart problems started bothering him too, and then of course with the mental stress of it. So we ended up going to Dr. Packey, thinking that would help.
I thought that he had triple bypass before Dr. Packey.
Oh, yeah, he did.
Yes.
He did. He went into the hospital with a heart problem, and they operated and did a triple bypass. And and that was when he went to Sea Pines, right after that hospital visit. He went
That was the second time.
he
Yeah.
went to Sea Pines. Sea Pines had changed completely. The first time, it was an absolutely wonderful experience. Darwin was happy there. He visited everybody in the hospital. The only problem, he couldn't get out of his wheelchair, but he was everywhere. He was so happy there. The second time, he wasn't doing well, but it was a whole different administration. Everything was totally opposite. It wasn't the happy place that it used to be. And that was too bad, because it always had a good reputation, but we didn't
And he
find
was
that.
also a lot more confused.
Yes, Darwin was confused. But, you know, I even saw it anyway, even in the help and the staff. It was different. But anyway, so he was there in Sea Pines a long time again.
And he had a big stroke at the end of his heart surgery.
Yes, he did.
So that he really went downhill mentally
Yeah.
after that.
And I remember, well, he was in he was at Sea Pines for a while, but not anyways long like he was the first time. And when he had that stroke, he was capable of thinking and talking and so forth, but he didn't think well. And he needed care all the time. And he got to the point where he couldn't function. I had to do everything for him. And he was bedridden. But anyway, and that was after I took him out of Sea Pines. He was such a mess at Sea Pines. He would argue. He didn't want to go to therapy. He would complain and get violent. And so I'd go home and cry after that and everything. And finally I just went and I said, I'm going to take him out of Sea Pines. And they had a fit. The doctor and nurse that's in charge of all of that, no, you can't do that. You're not capable of taking care of him. You can't take care of him. Because he was pretty heavy at the time. And I said, I will take care of him. I took care of him before he came in here, and I will take care of him again. And I said, if I leave him in here, he's going to die in 2 weeks. He's not going to be able to make it. He hated it. He'd get out of bed and thrash around at people, and it was so sad. And he just knew he hated the whole experience, and he didn't want to do what they wanted him to do. So finally, it took them a day or so to talk about it, and finally they told him I could take him home. And that was perfect. He settled down, he was good, he would sit in the chair, and he would never watch much TV then. because he couldn't concentrate on it. I
Yeah,
think.
he couldn't do the complex thinking
Right.
anymore.
But we would visit and talk, and he got along fine, and we had the cat, and and he would sleep in the bed at night and get along. He was on a lot of medication, but but I was able to take care of him, and he did. He got to where he couldn't get out of bed.
And at that point, but right before that is when you took him to Packy. Because he had always refused before
He wouldn't go.
the surgery, but then after he got home from Sea Pines, he, was more compliant because
Right.
he didn't really know what was going on.
Right.
And that's when we took him to Dr.
And he was
Packy.
much more settled then too, after he got away from Sea Pines. And he just didn't want to be in the hospital, and I don't blame him. I mean, it wasn't the best of situations, it never is, but, so anyway, yes, we went to Dr. Packy, and he needed a brain MRI. And that was another wrestling match on the table from the poor guy that was trying to give it to him. And so, he finally just stopped. He told me, he said, we can't get it done. And so he told the doctor, but also, I said, well, do you want me to make another appointment to bring him in? He said, I don't think you'll need to. He said, I think Dr. Packy can, from what we've got so far, can understand what's going on. And so we didn't have to take him back. And so anyway, then he was still at home, doing fine. And, not doing fine, but he was cared for, he was loved, he was fed, and he was content. That's the nice thing about it.
And Dr. Packy had said that the part of the brain that he was looking at looked like Swiss cheese because he had had so many
strokes.
little tiny strokes,
He
TIAs.
said he
I think.
had hundreds of strokes in his brain and his brain stem.
And there was no recovery from
Yeah.
that.
And so anyway, we got along. I didn't have much problem with him. He was very patient. He was. I'd get upset because I couldn't turn him, or I couldn't do this. I couldn't get, how I am. And he was very patient. He never complained. He never yelled at me.
He always
never-
called for you.
But he did. Yeah, at night he'd say, "Love you," and finally I got to the point where I couldn't sleep with him. I finally just moved into the hide-a-bed in the family room, and so I would answer him back. I'd say, "Love you," and that'd go on and on for a long time every night. Love you, and we talked a lot. I talked a lot to him, and occasionally we'd have a visitor. Now you guys would come, and he always
went
was
on
happy.
hospice.
Well, not for a while. He was always happy to see the kids, the grandchildren, and then of course he was bedfast probably most of the time after he came back from Sea Pines, and but he was content, and that was what was good. And he wasn't in pain really. I think he had some pretty strong medication, I'm sure. I don't remember now exactly
Well,
what
his
all it
heart,
was, but- and he
his
had
heart
a
was
lot-
healthy.
yeah.
It's just he had had a lot of strokes, and
Yeah.
so it was
That
just
was-
down to a mental situation.
It was. And so, it was sad for me, and I'd cry a little, and try not to do it too much in front of him. And he would too, occasionally, not very much, but occasionally. And a few people would visit. The pastors came maybe twice all that time. And then, there was then I had, how did I have the nice pastor that used to come? Was
On
it a
hospice,
Hospice.
you
Yeah, I
had
finally-
a chaplain.
Yeah, I had always heard of hospice, and I really didn't know how it functioned. And I thought, if you had hospice, you were ready to die anytime. So that's when you called hospice. Well, one day he had an appointment now that's when we were going to Dr. Taraski now. We had changed doctors. And Dr. Taraski was about a 10-minute drive down there. And so took him out, and we got along pretty well, getting him in and out of his wheelchair with me and him, and got him in the car, but he slid off the seat and went down on the floorboard. And I could not lift, no way could I lift him. The only way I got him ever out of the wheelchair was to slide him over. We had one of those sliding boards that you just slide across on. Same way getting him into bed at night and doing that and getting him out of bed. Same way. I could have never done it without that. I learned a lot about mobility when he was in that situation. And of course he was bedfast and had to, he couldn't get out of bed, so I had to take care of all of that too, as well as bathing him. I had somebody hooked me up with the visitation nurse, and we had that person come occasionally, and with that there was people that would come and give him a bath, and I thought, well, that'd help me a lot, Well, they said she must have been 17, I mean, honestly, can you believe that they would do that? And she didn't do anything. I mean, she took a washcloth and went over him a little bit, and that was it. Well, so I just gave him a good bath every day, and I just finally told her, just don't come, I'll just do it. And so anyway, but hospice came, and right away, and he fell out of that seat in the car. And so when I got him down to Dr. Taraski's office, I went in and tried to find a couple people to come out and help me get him out of it, so put him in his wheelchair and bring him in. Finally found a couple of nurses that could do that, I'll tell you. And so we got him in, he was examined, and then same way, thankfully I had the nurses help me take him back out, and brought him home, and I was able to get him out, slide him onto his wheelchair at home, and take him into the house and put him into bed. And that was when I finally decided I've got to call hospice.
I remember him being stuck on the floorboard in your garage too.
I'd forgotten that. Yeah, I imagine. That's you, and I know one day I had to have my next door neighbor come over and help me get him in or out of the car.
That might have been the time, because I think I came home from work right after that, maybe. Like, I remember seeing him being on the floor, but I don't think you and I could lift him out.
Yeah, no way.
Was it Scott that helped?
No, it was Scott, and what's his wife's name?
Julie.
She did.
She was,
over.
Okay.
Scott was gone.
So it may have been, that might not have been the time.
Yeah, it might not have been. She helped me get him in the car that time, one
Okay.
other time. But, so, anyway. Well, anyway, now I've lost my train of thought. I'm trying to think where we were.
So Taraski put you on hospice, and you had talked about...
No, Taraski didn't.
Oh, okay.
But what did do, one of the nurses said, because I told her, I said, it was so hard for me, they saw what a mess I was in, getting him into the doctor's office. And she said, well, why don't you call hospice? I said, well, I didn't know I could call hospice because he's not ready to die. And she said, that doesn't make any difference. They'll take care of him for months. Nobody had told me anything about hospice. And I never thought to ask, because I had it in my mind that the hospice was the last resort. So anyway, I got on, after we went through all that fiasco, I got on the phone and got hospice, and they came and interviewed me, and saw the situation, and told me exactly what they do, and this was getting pretty close to the time he was ready to expire, though, really, because it wasn't too long that they came. And anyway, we had round-the-clock nursing. Every 8 hours a new nurse came, and they were so nice and so good.
And the chaplain visited.
And there was a chaplain, and he was real nice. He was nice to talk to Darwin, although Darwin wouldn't talk to him. Darwin didn't act like he didn't want to hear. So he spent more time talking to me, actually.
Which is part of it.
Yes. Well, yeah. And also, well, in the same, our female pastor at the time at our church,
Jen.
she came more than anybody else. And, she spent all of her time talking to me. You know, Darwin just wouldn't, he'd lay there, but he wouldn't talk to him, wouldn't even look at him. And, it wasn't, I don't know why. I don't know. But anyway, they were real good, and I was thankful too, not just for the help, because they bathed him, they took care of everything. And they were so nice, such nice people. It seemed like there was one man that would come occasionally, and mostly women. And they gave me a lot of good pointers and told me what to expect when somebody dies. Because I had no idea. I would worry about that. What do I do? What am I doing wrong? What do I not know? Nobody told me anything about it. And you know, you read about it, but it's not like experiencing it. And so I was so thankful for hospice. And then of course he got along, was lucid, and talked to me every day. And like I said, I tried to get him to watch television. He'd always ask me to turn it off. We had a television there in the bedroom, and I wasn't sleeping with him either. Like I said.
Well, he ended up on a hospital bed too.
Well, only when hospice came.
Yeah.
And they did, right off, they ordered him a hospital bed, and that was good too. And I was able, we had a big bedroom, and so I was able to put him in to set that hospital bed at the end of our bed. So I could sleep in there at night too then. And then I'd notice him, because I'd turn it on, TV, and I'd notice him laying there. Since he was closer to the screen, he was watching it. So, you know, he just wasn't seeing well. And so anyway, he died.
Well, he got to the point where he couldn't swallow, and then it was only
well, he ate
a couple days after that.
Well, he ate a lot of. I fed him a lot of yogurt. He liked yogurt, and he liked what did he drink? Some kind of fruit juice, I guess.
Well, he also had those Ensure shakes.
Yeah, the Ensure shakes. He liked those. He looked forward to that every day for his milkshake. And but I tried to feed him as much as I could, but it got to the point where he was just about having the milkshake and the yogurt. And so, but he was, you know, and so I don't remember what day it was now when he passed away. It was in the middle of the night.
I think it was Sunday night to Monday morning, about 1:30 in the morning.
You and Dawn and the two kids were there.
Only I was there. I was spending a few nights with you.
Well, I knew they were.
And
they were
after
there.
he died, then we called them over.
Oh, okay. I was thinking you were all there. Okay. And so anyway, about that night, about 1:30 or so, I got up, and because I would get up regularly and look in on him, and I got up and I stood there at the door. The nurse was asleep. She used to sit in the chair right beside the door, and of the bedroom, and she had dozed and was asleep with her eyes closed, her head bowed and her eyes closed, and. I stood there for a minute looking at him, and finally I made the statement. I said, "He's not breathing," and that woke her up immediately. And boy, she got on the phone and got things rolling real quick. And so I went over and I loved him and kissed him and everything. And then you know, we called the funeral home, you know, and so they sent. They told me, they said, now right away we'll send somebody in just a regular station wagon, and they said if you could have the garage door open where they can back in. That was done so well. I mean, the neighbors wouldn't have even known. Nobody would have known unless they'd been standing outside. And and not that I cared, but it just didn't disturb the neighborhood. No flashing lights or anything like that.
It was
came
respectful.
in.
Yeah.
It was done very well. That's a wonderful funeral home.
Davis Seawinds.
What was it?
Davis Seawinds.
Was right, and I would recommend
In
that,
Ocala.
and that's where I'm gonna have them take care of my situation. But anyway, that man there had given me so many pointers of things to do and what to expect financially and every way under the sun, what to do about the
He had a
banking
package.
account.
He gave you a
did. He had it
package
all
and went through
printed
it
out,
with you.
and he told me all about it. It was wonderful. And that just sailed so well for me. I was concerned over it, and it just went so well because of his counseling on that. It was just wonderful. And the hospice. I mean, everything went so well for Darwin. And he was sleeping. He had stopped communicating the afternoon before.
Yeah, we had a moment of clarity with him. We were
Yeah.
all able to thank him and say goodbye, and we knew he had clarity because he had a little tear coming down.
Yes.
Because he had kind of been in a
He
coma.
was aware. Yeah.
He had kind of been in a coma before that, and then after we all said goodbye, then
He went to sleep.
and that's when the kids and I were over. The kids and Dawn and I were over together, and then they had gone home, and then I called them back after he died.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was just sleeping peacefully. He was just resting, and he just slipped from being asleep to heaven. And I'm just so thankful for that, because I mean, if you have to die, what a wonderful way for that to be for you, for whoever was dying. Because other than being in pain and stress and people around talking to you and petting you and everything else, it was just, he was just there, and he wasn't.
And a lot of that's attributed to you because you took really good care of him.
Well,
A lot of people wouldn't have done that. So
I was with him. Well, I took good care of him. I did take care of him. And I'm not bragging. I just did. I was determined he was going to be peaceful about everything, and he was. He was happy, and he was content. It wasn't that he didn't sit around. And we did have some good conversations, but not many. But he did. He got along fine, and he did have a prelude to the whole thing because he had been bedridden with Guillain-Barré. So it wasn't totally new for him. He wasn't stressed over that like many people would have been, And God just made sure that it went well for Darwin. So anyway, and then that funeral man, around 3 o'clock, the funeral guy came, and a real nice young man, and came in, and Don helped him lift Darwin onto the stretcher, and I took him to the ambulance, and he was gone. And then a couple days later, I went over to
Davis Seawinds.
yeah, Seawinds. I went over there to make sure everything was okay. Well, I had called and wanted to know, they said they'd call me when it was time, when they had him back because he was cremated. And so, I had taken care of, I took money out of my savings account and took care of the bills and everything, and made all the payments that I needed to make. And right off, the first one was Target. Darwin, I didn't remember we had a charge at Target, and Darwin had charged some stuff at Target. I think it's over $100. I don't know what it was now, but it wasn't, like 25. It was a lot more than that. And right off, they said, it's taken care of. You have no bill from us.
That's great.
And the guy at the funeral home had told me, he said, you be sure and get so many copies made of his death certificate and send it to all of these people that he's done anything with, the car, everything, insurance, of course. And so I did, and told them, they had all that information, and got that all taken care of. And a lot of, we had several credit card things with his name on it, not mine. I think some of my name was on it too, but we never were billed. Never got a bill for any of those, and that really helped, let me tell you. Because, you know, I didn't have his Social Security anymore. I had, well, let's put it this way, I had his Social Security and not mine. There was only like $20 difference in the two. So, you know, I didn't make a tremendous amount of money from his Social Security, but at least I did lose it. See, I didn't have his income or at all. I was just on my income. And fortunately, I had, at that time, I had always had a savings in my, through my retirement. And I had, at that time, you know, I had been retired long enough that I was drawing that savings, and so that saved me there. And then and of course, we were getting along fine because we had 2 Social Securities coming in. But now, then I was limited now just to my Social Security, and that's what I have now, the Social Security and my retirement. My teacher's retirement is what I had. I paid into that. No Medicare, stuff like that, because I had paid for everything. I had put all of that money in when I was teaching for years and years, and that paid off to me. And then, of course, the Social Security paid off, and I pray that you and Don will have that same benefit when you're my age. And I pray,
Don will have it.
well, yes, but it's nice to have 2 of them. And I pray that Dex and Derica, when they retire someday, will have those benefits, but who knows what's gonna happen to our federal government in the meantime. You're probably gonna be okay, you and Don, but I worry about Dex and Derica's future in that regard. Because I never could afford to do a 401k or anything like that. And Darwin didn't either. And so it was just my retirement income that I have now, plus Social Security. And it takes good care of me, and I'm so thankful for that. Every day I thank God for that. And for the government being what it is to help me like it did. And it's not government benefits, that it was stuff that money that I contributed to the government, and I'm getting back. And that's the way it works, and I'm so thankful for that. So anyway, then I was able to go to the funeral home and pick up his
Ashes.
yeah. I remember sitting there, because they let me sit in there in the office there. And there was a box. It was in a box, and I sat there and I cried and cried. But anyway, I brought him home, kept him here at home for a month, I think, Doris, or longer, before we ever, because you weren't able to come to the funeral. You were too busy. We had to put the funeral off for at least a month or 2.
You sure it was me, or was it getting all the relatives to?
No, it wasn't that. It was you had something doing for the church every time, and you.
Well, it was probably campus ministry.
It's probably why.
Campus ministry,
Well, yeah,
because that was the
yeah,
beginning of
yeah.
the semester.
Whatever, yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, you didn't have any time off so we kept putting the funeral off, and that's all right. It worked fine, you know. He was there. We had him, and so then we had a wonderful funeral. Pastor Tim planned such a one, and you did, Reese. Such a wonderful funeral for Darwin, and had a nice crowd, really.
Several people came in from out of the area.
Yeah, we had
Family
some
and
relatives
friends.
there, and not many, but some friends. We had different friends that showed up, which I was surprised.
And Uncle
because
Marvin.
they live here in Florida, and so they came.
Uncle
And-
Marvin came, and he
and-
died not long after that. About a year or so after that.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, Darwin's brother and his nephew drove his brother and his sister-in-law down for the funeral, and then my sister Linda came, and so
And Dee and Dana.
and her son and daughter-in-law, yeah. And
No,
so-
daughter. It was Dana.
Oh, it wasn't Stacy, it was Dana, that's right, I remember that, yeah, both Dana and Davy, yeah. And so anyway, it was very nice, and I had asked, of course, our church is wonderful, and they always have a nice spread for after a funeral for anybody.
Reception. That's done by the Dorcas group.
Yes, and they were so nice to do that, and then I had asked for the choir to sing, because I had been a choir member for all those years, and then Dex and Derica were in the youth choir there, and so the youth choir sang too, and so it was just a wonderful thing, and and the other relative that came was Janice and Dave. They lived down here half a year, and they still do, and they came to the funeral too. And then, of course, Linda Cochran, and her husband was still alive. He died a year after Darwin died. We had been close friends ever since we were children, all of us. And so they came to the funeral, and that was so wonderful to see them. And then we had friends from Tarpon Springs, where we used to live. They came over.
Clyde and Joe.
Yeah, and I don't know, that may have been most of the people from away, and then of course several church members came, although not a lot of church members here knew Darwin. And because he wasn't active in our church here. He had been real active in our other churches, every other church we'd ever been in, but never was here. He was slowing down, and so anyway, it was stressful for me. And I remember Pastor Tim telling me, he said, it's almost like planning a wedding. He said, it's that stressful. And he said, that's just the way it is. And
Dad's ashes were laid down at the bottom of the large oak tree to
Yes.
the side of the church.
Yeah, at the memorial garden.
Across from
beside
the
our
river,
church.
yeah.
And Darwin always went out the side door when he left church. Again, I was in the choir, and so I didn't sit with him. Darwin spent every year of his married life not sitting with me during church, because I was always singing in the choir somewhere, wherever we lived. And but anyway, he would always go out the side door, which was real close. He would sit in the back. And another reason he wanted to sit in the back at our church is his head got cold. And he always wore a hat because he was bald on top, and his head would get cold. And in our church, you'd freeze. And so he'd sit in the back where he could stick his hat on where nobody would notice. And so that's why he would always sit in the back. And he went out that side door. And so he always walked out that way. And so we decided that we would have him buried right at the turn of the sidewalk there, where as he would have walked by every Sunday morning. And of course then the wall has everybody's name on it from who's in the memorial garden, and his name was up there that day. So anyway, so I got along just fine after that, and I used to pace the floor and cry. For a long time I did that because I didn't know what was going to happen to me. I knew the money was I wasn't making as much money, but I knew I was going to be able to get along because we had good insurance. He was covered with everything, and it took a lot of my savings to pay off the funeral home and the cremation and all of that, and the hospital was totally taken care of. I did get a bill from Sea Pines. I paid on that Sea Pines bill for a year or more. It was a big bill. And finally I called him and I said, I said, you're the only people that's billing me. And I said, I'm happy to pay it. But I said, my insurance, and the insurance had to pay you something. And they stopped billing me. I don't know if that was a mistake, but I never got any money back from them. But they were determined I was going to pay every month on that bill for him, and he was covered. He had insurance. We had insurance. But anyway, I don't know what the deal was there. But I told him, I said, I just can't afford this, and So I think screw up on their part. I really do. But then again, they didn't refund me any money, so.
So
I was
eventually,
still able to manage the car, and I was able to manage the insurance and everything, and it was tough financially, but I made it, and still do. And then after that, he died in August.
so you stayed there
And
about a
we had-
year.
Yeah, we had, and I stayed there at Sheridan Lakes for about a year after that. And finally I decided, that was too expensive for me. And you had mentioned it to me, so why, you can move in with us if you want. And I had talked to Don about that too. I said, well, that way, between us, we'd be paying less, just like Don, or like Dex is now, with 4 people living in one condo, they're not paying very much at all individually. And that helped Doris and Don too, and me. So I moved in with Doris and Don for 3 years, me and my kitty cat, and got along just fine. It was a little uncomfortable, because they didn't have a spare bedroom for me. And so I had to sleep on the hide-a-bed in the living room, and that was all right. It was comfortable enough, but it was right. Dex had a lot of friends in all the time. A lot of these big guys in the house all the time, and some of the big girls were louder than the guys were that would come in. And so at night, and of course they'd stay till 3 in the morning. Sometimes those kids would, and I didn't get much sleep. Lots of times I'd just go out and sit in the garage where it was quiet and read, or watch my phone, And so that was a little uncomfortable, and I'd be in there trying to go to sleep at night, and then they'd make a steady stream to the bathroom right through that living room a lot. So anyway, it was a little uncomfortable, but I got along fine there. I was not the most pleasant person to live with for Doris and Don, because I was really upset. I was very unhappy, the fact that I was alone, and the fact that I was worried about what was going to happen to me in my future. And that was stressful, very stressful for me. And and with all the kids making a lot of noise, and you know how rude teenagers can be, and that was a bad situation because I had no privacy in that regard, and so it was uncomfortable. Doris and Don were wonderful to me. They had lots of patience with me because I would get angry and slam doors and whatever. I just made a fool of myself a lot of times.
You helped a lot with the housework.
I did do a lot of housework, and I felt like I wanted to do that to kind of pay my way for being there, and I did pay them money every month too. It was a few $100s that I paid you in a sense for rent.
Yeah, it was helpful.
Yeah. So I lived there for 3 years with Doris and Don, and like I said, they were very nice to me. They were wonderful. They were very patient with me because I was very unhappy, and I'm sure they realized that. And the amount of loud teenagers bothered me a lot. I just couldn't hardly handle that. And they were nice kids, nothing bad about them, but just kids, And
You were in a different time of life.
I was a what?
You were in a different time of life.
Yeah. It was totally, I hadn't had a kid at home except to visit for how many years? It was a big change for me. And then I felt lonely and lost too because I was alone, and I had never been alone for many years. And Darwin was always a good husband. He had always taken good care of me, just like, you know, now I'll call Don up and say, Don, I can't screw this light bulb. Not that, but something like that, you know. And he'd stop by and fix it. And I thought, how, there's just so much that I'm not strong enough to do around a house. And I'm still finding that, although the house I'm in now is much easier to work with than the one, even the brand new house was not as easy to work with.
Me too, though.
What do you mean?
I can't do it all myself either.
Well, no, and see, I couldn't either. And Darwin, he was so, he could do everything, just like Don. I mean, they can wire a room or put up lights out front or set up the Christmas tree or all of that kind of thing, you know. And there's just things that you don't do when you're married, really. And I learned since then to do a lot of things. But so it was okay. So I left. I moved. A house down the street from Doris and Don's, the little house that I'm in now.
Exactly 1 block away.
Yeah, 6 houses away. Except it's not on the same street. We're on different streets, and we're on opposite corners of the little squared off neighborhood within the subdivision. And it's a beautiful, I am so happy here. I love this subdivision. It's wooded and a lot of trees and shrubs and a lot of lots that are not used, you know, have never been built on. And so it's like a woods, you know, and nice neighbors. The neighbors that I know are real nice. I don't know a lot of neighbors here because the people are friendly, but that's all it is.
It's a more settled, older neighborhood.
It is, right. And there are several young families around, and it's not like half the neighbors like when we lived in Hardin, Illinois. I mean, every day somebody was stopping by, or you know, when you first move in, everybody in town stops by, you know.
It's also a different generation.
Well, it could be. And so anyway, it's you know, you don't run next door all the time like I have there at Hardin, and then when we moved to Taylorville, the neighbors next door, we were just good friends and in each other's house probably daily. You know, it was a big difference to move. Every time we moved, it was different. But anyway, so I got settled. I had my furniture. I had placed all of my furniture in a storage unit when I left Sheridan Lakes. And at that time, I had a big garage sale again, and I sold another half of everything I owned, and or I gave it away and sold it, and whatever I could palm off on Doris and Don. I kept thinking, don't you need that? Couldn't you use this? You're welcome to it. I said, Don, when Darwin was in the hospital, his tools were always a mess. My dad used to complain about how he'd lay tools down in his place, and my dad always had to have a perfect workshop. He knew right where everything was. And Darwin wasn't that way. If he was through with it, he just lay it down and go off. Well, so his garage, he had a lot of stuff. And so while he was in the hospital that first time, I got some of these big plastic containers and organized. I had one for auto, one for yard, one for whatever, and labeled it all, and I just put stuff in there. All kinds of hammers, all kinds of saws, all kinds of tools, and everything else that went with the car, and all kinds of them that you would need out in the yard, and then there's others, you know, and so I had a few big boxes like that. So when I moved from Sheridan Lakes, that's when I had set that up. We got rid of a lot of that, and then I still had a lot of that. Maybe I did that. I think I did that when we were in Sheridan Lakes instead of before that. And so there were a lot of boxes of tools and things. And so after Darwin passed away, then I organized set up and had somebody come in to do it, which I would never, ever recommend to do that. If you're gonna have an estate sale, you do it yourself. You're gonna lose money with whoever comes in and does it. And you'll lose items. So, I learned that the hard way. But I had all those, I kept telling Dawn, I said, Dawn, I've got a whole box of automotive stuff. I said, take what you want. Well, I don't need to. No, Dawn, take what you want. And after that, Dawn's had to go and buy stuff that I had for Darwin because he wouldn't take it before. But anyway, that helped a lot of it. And some of the old tools that Darwin had collected, I think Dawn got some of those too. And I was glad to see that. Darwin had a couple of shotguns he had for years, never used them, of course. And one of them had belonged to his dad, and the other one I think Darwin had got. I thought he got it, and I'm pretty sure he did, but somebody told me they didn't think that was right. When he was way back, when we were first married, he was selling cookware and china for a company around, and as I said, he was always a good salesman. And so one year he won a shotgun, and then when he was, there are a lot of perks when you're in sales. When he was with Farm Bureau after we moved from Taylorville to Normal, Illinois, there were several trips that he was sent on, nice trips. We went to Mexico, we went to the Bahamas a couple times, and he went to California once or twice, and he went to Hawaii, and just a lot of nice trips he had. That was when we were separated. So anyway, but prior to that I went with him. But anyway, this shotgun he had, and I'm sure he won that he was given that as a gift from a sales company. Somebody else told me they didn't think that was right, but he never bought it. It was a gift. And so after he died, there they were. I thought, what on earth am I going to do with this? I don't know anything about guns. I don't know, who to sell them to or anything. And so it was after the funeral that day, we were all at my house. And I told him, I said, Darwin had a shotgun in there that belonged to your dad. I was telling Marvin. And I said, if you want it, you can have it. And so, Marvin said, I don't really need a shotgun like that. And I said, well, what about Bryce, or what about, Bryce?
Bryce.
I said, what about Bryce? Bryce was there. I said, well, if it's not, it was your dad's. Well, come to find out, it did, I think, belonged to his dad.
I know it was an antique.
Yeah, and so Don right off got on the internet and got a whole history on that one particular gun. We followed the number that was on the gun, and had been made back in the 1800s. And so it was probably pretty valuable. So anyway, Bryce took it home with him. So I don't know whatever happened to it. I don't know if he sold it or not, but it's a valuable antique for somebody. It was an old gun. I suppose it could have been shot. I don't know if you tried, but. And then the other one was a newer gun, although it was getting old now, and it was Darwin got it from a sales company as a gift. And so, and David always had guns. He's a hunter and he collects guns sometimes, and that's, and so I said, well, this was the Wagoner family's gun, and so I gave that to them. And so I asked David, I said, would you like to have the other rifle, or shotgun? It was a shotgun. And he said, well, I don't know, you want to get rid of it? I said, well, I don't know what else to do with it. And I said, the other gun went through the family, but I said, this one didn't. And I said, if you'd like to have it, you can have it, and so he took that. So I got rid of both guns, I was happy for that.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I got along all fine and lived here at Doris's and was comfortable, and they were nice to me, and Don's an excellent cook. I think I probably put on some weight, and I did. I do the dishes and just take care of the house, really, basically clean that bathroom, both bathrooms a lot, and things like that, and clean outside. I was always doing stuff outside, weeding and taking care of things and cleaning all around the deck, out around the pool. And there were some plants out there that I took care of and things like that. And so anyway, this little house became available down the street. So I walked by there and I watched it, and they were rehabbing the whole thing. It was real new siding, it looked like new roof, everything was done well on it. And so I stopped in one day and just told them, you know, I was living with my daughter down the street, and I think, you know, it's time for me to move into my own place. And they were real nice. The Sullivans is their name, and Julia and Rick, and they were just real nice people. We had a good visit, and I had stopped, and they lived, well, they still do, down in the Miami area, so they weren't here too often. And so I'd stop in lots of times when they were up, and I'd see their car there. And so eventually I rented this from them, and I've been here ever since, and I've been here now. This is my third year here in that house, in the new house.
So let's talk about that next time, because we're over an hour now.
Okay.
But next time we'll pick up on the new house.
I just want to say that I've been happy here, and I'm happy to be a neighbor to Doris and Don, and to visit back and forth, and see the kids in their activities. I can always, since we're here, ever since
When
they
they're
were
here.
little, ever since they were little, Darwin and I were able to participate in their school things that was going on, and the things they did at church, and we always went to church together, and it's been real nice the whole time. And I do want to say how happy I am here. I'm very happy in that little house. It's easy to take care of. It's clean and new. It had all new appliances, everything new in there, and tile floors, and easy to take care of. And now I'm the new owner of 2 kitty cats. The kitty cat that I had with me at Doris and Don's, and who had quite a time at first when we first moved there with her cats. And but he made it. At night at her house, he'd sleep on one side of my bed at the foot, and one of her cats would always sleep at the other side, and I think that was Lennox. Always sleep with me. And so anyway, then so the kitty, Jesse was his name. When I adopted him from a foster home, and then and that was
But you adopted him when you lived
when I lived
in Sheridan Lakes
right.
in West Melbourne.
And then Derek's had a friend who had a kitty, and she didn't want it anymore, and she asked Doris if since Doris had so many cats, if she would take this little black kitty from her, who's a fairly young cat. And,
Well, it was supposed to be temporary, but it turned out to be permanent.
For 3 months, she wanted Doris to get, and then of course she never showed up again to get him.
She moved to
get her,
Chicago.
the little female. And so after a while, then after I was settled over at my house, kitty cats. What would we do without them? Anyway, Doris, the little black kitty, was having a stressful time at Doris's house.
She was bullying her a lot.
Yeah, and she would scream. I mean, literally scream real loud. I didn't know a cat could do that. And she had also had a rough time at this girl's house. It was an apartment she lived in with her dad, and her dad was drunk a lot, and he would.
And they had a dog.
I don't know what all he did, and they had a big dog, and I found out later that the girl told me, she said she just kept the little kitty in her bedroom all the time. And so Doris wanted to know if I would take that kitty, because she had her hands full with all of them she had, and I only had one.
Well, I figured she would be happier at your house with
Well,
one
yes,
cat.
I was kind of hoping to get another one for my cat. Well, so I adopted her, and she was very stressed. But her name is Nova, and but she's filled out. She's very settled now. She still is not a lap pet, but she'll sit right beside me, and you can tell she had a dysfunctional childhood. Poor little kitty. She was very frightened of everything, but she's learned to get along with my big old Jesse cat, and he's good to her. He really is. He bosses her around a little bit, but he's pretty good to her. And but it took her a good year to settle in at my house, to be really, she was jumping, she was afraid, any sound, and she still is. If there's a loud sound or just something I did the other day, I dropped a bowl on my, don't ever drop glass on a tile floor, it scatters into 1,000 pieces, and then you spend time mopping and then vacuuming and making sure you got all the little pieces up so the cats wouldn't get into them. And anyway, when that broke, honestly, I couldn't see her for the rest of the day. It just scared her to death. And so she is still very, very stressed about sounds, but she's braver. And I call her my little bugger because I let them stay in my garage. I only have the one big garage door, and I keep my car in there because it's not running, and so I just keep it in there and I don't drive it. And so it's a safe place, and it's clean out there. I keep that garage clean, and the kitties are out and kind of eat out there, and they have their little, I call it their apartment out there, because they have a litter pan and things. And I feed Jesse out there because I can't let him eat dinner near Nova, because he'll eat his, then he'll push her aside and eat hers. And so he eats in the garage and she eats in the house.
Ironically, that's what Luna does here.
Is it? And so anyway, but my garage is safe and comfortable for them, and I have a night light out there when I don't have the regular light on, and there's no excess outside door except for the big door, and so they don't get out. I open it to take the garbage out. That's about the only time I ever open that big door. And so I keep there is one going into the house, and I keep it ajar all the time for them so they can go in and out to the garage. And they like to go to the garage too. Nova likes to go out there too. She doesn't stay out there. Now, they'll both sleep on my bed at night most of the time. But if there's a sound, she's gone. And she has a little place that she can climb under. It's under my mattress that's it's fabric that's loosened, and so she can climb up into that and sleep if she wants to. And then she can go into my bedroom closet, and I've got a little rug in the corner of my closet in there, and she can go in there too if she wants to. But she doesn't very often.
Okay, well, we'll pick up here next time with your house.
Okay, well, that's where we're at now, so.
Thank you.